Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tamara Ecker, Managing Director of British American Business. For those of you not familiar with BAB, we are the leading transatlantic business association supporting companies with operations in both the North American and UK markets. We run regular programs on themes impacting our member companies with a suite of approximately 100 events per year and across multiple regions. In fact, this week we hosted programming in Houston, where I just was, and in Nashville, where BAB CEO Duncan Edwards currently is. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here to the next iteration in our Power of Purpose series. I think we as business leaders know that purpose in business is a cross-cutting theme, and today we are incredibly lucky to have with us a CEO and leader who has helped write the playbook on purpose, Carmine Sibio. Our Power of Purpose series is made possible thanks to the partnership and support of BAB member BrandPie. And to moderate today's conversation and properly introduce Carmine, it is my pleasure to introduce Dave Allen, founder of BrandPie. Dave founded BrandPie in 2008, and the agency's purpose is to help clients create the idea that can transform their business through the lens of brand and culture. Before BrandPie, Dave built and ran WPP's Global Brand Consulting Group and has a strong passion for CSR and established the BrandPie Foundation in 2010 to help charities build their brands and improve their fundraising capabilities. Dave, it's a pleasure to have you, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Tamara, and a great privilege to have Carmine and to be able to have this fireside chat without a fire, but I guess that's the modern world now. Before I start, I'm just going to cover a few housekeeping rules, and as my wife says to me, I'm not very good at housekeeping, so I have to look at the rules and make sure I get them right. So I'm going to talk to Carmine for about 35-40 minutes, and then we will open it up to questions for everybody. If we can have questions, not presentations, that would be fantastic. And if you can use the raise hand feature, I'll come to you if you've got a question. If you've got a question that comes up as we're talking, then put it in chat, and I'll see if I can drop it into the conversation that we're having. But I'd like, if possible, to get people involved and have a dialogue. And I know we've got a lot of people on this particular webinar, but we'll try and sort of accommodate those questions. So we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for questions, and then I'll sort of get Carmine to do a 2-minute sort of summary. So the first question I just want to get you talking about, Carmine, because it's not every day I get the chance to sort of talk to somebody who's leading, guiding, mentoring an organization of 350,000 people. And I can't get my head around what you do every day and how you lead and guide an organization of this size. So I'd just love you to talk a little bit about sort of what it's like, what it feels like to lead an organization like this, and how do you stay connected to your people?
Dave, thank you. And it's great to be here. Thank you, Tamara. It's great to be with British American Business Council. It's great also because I actually started my week this week in London. I was in London starting on Monday morning, and now I'm back in the US. So it feels appropriate that we're having this conversation with the British American Business Council in a week that I've spent time in both the UK and the US. I was fortunate enough actually to be involved in an organization called the Sustainable Markets Initiative, which with a bunch of other CEOs, and the organization is actually co-chaired by His Royal Highness Prince Charles and Brian Moynihan. So I was lucky enough to have dinner in Buckingham Palace and then a meeting in St. James Palace on Tuesday. And now I'm back in New York. And so when you ask about my typical day, that's a bit of a week that I just described, but it's fun. I am back on the road, so my typical week is usually I am on an airplane or in different places around the world. Obviously, during COVID, that stopped, but now it's back in play. I think it's in terms of the large organization, it's true. It's we're 350,000 people in over 150 countries. But we are very compartmentalized. So the organization is organized well in terms of leadership. We obviously bring up a lot of leaders and frankly train a lot of leaders for different areas around the business world. And we're very proud of that. So we have over 1 million alumni from EY around the world that are in different roles, whether it's, different roles in the corporate world, different roles in the philanthropic world, different roles on boards and everything else. So we're all very proud of that. But, in terms of, I am truly a believer and truly a zealot around purpose. And our purpose is building a better working world. And that's something that's really been in play for about 10 years now. And so we could talk more about that. But Dave, my short answer is there's no typical day at EY. I gave you a little bit of a view of a typical week. And the week still has a day or two to go. But I am very excited that we are, that my travels are back and then I'm back visiting different countries, even though I have not been able to get back to Asia since COVID. And I'm looking forward to getting back to Asia as well.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I'm just going to run through a few of the stats on sort of EY that you didn't sort of mention, but you've got an organization of over 350,000 people. The staggering fact I learned yesterday was that over 3 million people applied for a job at EY in the last 12 months. And I just cannot get my head around that and how you deal with it. You must have some sort of computer say no system or something. It's just quite incredible. And, you're now, the #1 preferred brand in the professional services sector, top 10 global brand strength, according to sort of FT, CAGR at 7.3%. I mean, it's a staggering set of statistics. And, but back in 2011, that wasn't quite the case. We're coming off the back of the financial crisis. And, that's when I sort of first started sort of working with you and the team there. And the sort of conversations we had around the creation of the purpose and building a better working world, and I know you were heavily involved in that. What do you think those 5 words have done for this organization?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and it does go back to 2011, Dave, as you know, where we really were setting out a new strategy, a new global strategy for EY. And this came into being, our new chairman at the time, Mark Weinberger, actually asked me to do a role, basically be the #2 person globally at EY. So he and I really set out a new strategy, which we called Vision 2020. It was the first time we really set out and had a true global strategy for all our businesses and all our people around the world. And that's when we sat down and said, look, we as an organization, we need to build up our brand and we need to have a purpose. And so we were one of the first firms really out there to develop a purpose, and that's building a better working world. And those conversations 10 years ago were not simple conversations. And, many companies are starting out even now on building a purpose. And it was really, the words that made a difference, and every word makes a difference. And I do want to make sure that people understand that when we talk about a purpose and we talk about building a better working world, that is not just a tagline. In fact, it's not even a tagline. It's really what we believe. And it's really it takes a while to really drill that into every employee to make sure that they understand how their role fits into the purpose of the organization, which for us is building a better working world. So that's Dave, when it kind of got started. And we had a true global strategy, which we call Vision 2020. It was really based on looking for the long term. So at the time it was a 7-year strategy. And it had everything from financial goals to goals on how we were going to build out the business. And in particular, it did have a goal on how we were going to build out our brand that you all have been very involved in. And at the time, we also went for a name change from Ernst & Young to EY. Our legal names in a lot of different countries is still Ernst & Young. We still sign audit opinions Ernst & Young. But we went to a name EY, which was much more simple. I think today, the simpler, the better. And obviously also a name that resonated in the digital world that made things easy. We had a lot of time in terms of developing everything from the color scheme of EY, and then really started driving the brand externally. And we wanted to make sure that we spent a lot of time with our clients, with media and everything else, social media, around driving what our brand meant. And at the center of that was our purpose of building a better working world.
Do you think it's sort of helped in employee engagement and, you know, the attraction of talent? Does it play a role in that sort of area for you?
Yeah, well, you mentioned 3 million applicants every year, and that's absolutely true. And you know, we hired this past year. We hired past 18 months, we hired 150,000 people globally. So we do hire a lot of people. We have a lot of applications. We joke around that if you take the amount of people we hire versus the applications, it might be harder to get a job at EY than it is to get into maybe a top university in a particular country. But we do a good job at recruiting. But when it comes down to in particular young people today, I think if you are an organization that doesn't have a purpose, one of the first questions we get is, what's the purpose and what does it mean? And so we really have spent a lot of time making sure that all our leaders can describe what building a better working world means for all our people. So I'll give you an example. For someone who's just starting at EY out of university and let's say starting in the audit practice, you know, the question is how does a brand new auditor really fit into building a better working world? And that brand new auditor, when they get put on an assignment as part of a team and they're auditing different line items of a balance sheet, what they're doing is making sure that those line items are correct. And therefore they're giving, by making sure those line items are correct, and making sure that the financials themselves are correct, which is giving the capital markets confidence that the financial statements are correct. And by giving the capital markets confidence, capital markets are able to finance and so forth different projects, different initiatives around the world. And that's frankly building a better working world. But it's that connection that's critical, Dave, because you know, if you just talk about things up here and you can't bring it down to that level, then it gets more and more difficult to really have a true purpose in the organization. And this is true, you know, that was an audit example. You know, in consulting, we have very similar examples in terms of really our consultants helping our clients really unlock potential around people, technology, you know, and innovation. So we talk about this at all levels in the organization.
I'm going to switch to sort of another sort of area where it may have an impact, but acquisitions. I know you've done over 180 acquisitions in the last 10 years. And, you know, that's a crazy number. And, you know, I remember listening to the CEO of Parthenon, and I don't know whether he was just playing to the crowd, but he was saying that one of the reasons he not sold to PwC or to KPMG was the fact that he felt you were really purpose driven and he loved building a better working world and he wanted to be a part of that. And it was a great speech. And but I just wonder whether this sort of plays a role in helping you attract those acquisitions, because I know they're key for growth in the area of technology particularly.
Yeah, we've done a lot of acquisition, as you mentioned, and we talk about purpose all the time. And whenever I'm introduced to a potential firm that we are thinking of, you know, partnering with or acquiring, I talk about our purpose and I talk about how they would fit into building a better working world. And with Bill Ackmeyer at Parthenon in the early days, he really believed in our purpose, and that's and when we described it to him, he really believed it, and that did make a difference in terms of his attraction to EY versus some of our competitors. And so we see that over and over again, Dave. It's not different than attracting, you know, a new college graduate into our consulting practice. It's very similar, and it has to fit in. I mean, it has to fit into your purpose. And this gets into, our purpose now has been around for 10 years. And I will tell you, at the beginning, let's say in 2013, 14, it took a while for it to really take, to be honest. I mean, it's not something at the time, the idea of purpose was new. And so I think today it's a little bit different. If we were to start today, I think you could really make the time much shorter. But it took time for us to really drill it into the organization. And even, I think it was 3-4 years ago, we did a survey in terms of, really looking at building a better working world and how much it's been ingrained in the organization. And at the partner and senior manager level, that survey was like 96% of the people knew exactly how they fit into our purpose.
Wow.
But at the newer levels, the numbers were lower. The numbers were more like 65%, which told us that we had to continue to do work to drive our purpose and to make sure people understand it. And then we have, the way our business model works, we have a lot of people that we hire, but we also lose a good amount of people. Typically, our attrition rate could be between 15 and 20%. And so we have a lot of new people that are joining EY all the time. So for us, in a way, that's a good thing, because we have to continue to talk about our purpose to make sure that it's understood throughout the organization. But obviously that takes a lot of work.
And when I often think of sort of purpose sometimes in the sort of context of it gives your business a license to operate. It sort of helps society connect with you, and we all know that we've got sort of a climate crisis, and we've got to sort of fix that, and we're on our pathway to net zero. And I just wonder how it sort of influences and helps you with things like ESG and CSR and diversity. I know you're really hot on D&I. Yeah, Dave. So if I can take us then, in 2012, 13, we had Vision 2020, and we had Building a Better Working World. Then I would take you up to when I took over as CEO, which is really in 2019. Really, this conversation started in 2018, where we thought we needed a new strategy, a new global strategy. Our new global strategy that we developed is called Next Wave. And it's really around our ambition. I'll get to our purpose in a second, but our ambition is to create long-term value as the world's most trusted and distinctive professional services firm. And those two words were critical in terms of what we really want to be in our ambition. And I tell all our partners that whenever we're the most trusted and distinctive in any proposal, we typically win. When we don't have those two things, we typically don't win. But if I come back to, before I even talk about the ambition, is our purpose. And we spent a lot of time on whether we should change our purpose. But we all felt really strongly, including new people that joined the organization, that we had the right purpose for our new strategy. And so that became important in terms of how we would drive our new strategy and how we would drive it forward. And our new strategy, Dave, is really built around long-term value. So we want to make sure that we're creating long-term value for all our stakeholders. And it is a stakeholder-driven strategy. And when I talk about stakeholders, I talk about our clients, I talk about our people, and I talk about society. And what you mentioned in terms of ESG and in terms of diversity, that really fits into our entire strategy. In terms of building a better working world. You're not going to build a better working world unless you are focused on sustainability, or unless you are focused on diversity and inclusiveness and equity as well. And so that all fits in terms of what we're doing. And as I mentioned, we are very driven on sustainability today. In fact, I'll tell you a story. When we were rolling out Next Wave, and obviously continuing with Building a Better Working World, I had a town hall that was actually in New York, and we had about 2,000 people there. And I was, describing what Next Wave was and the amount of investments we were going to make into technology, into our people, and so forth.
And everyone really liked it. Everyone really liked it. But then I asked if there were any questions in the room, and they had an electronic device they could ask questions. But one individual in the middle of the room actually raised their hand, and it was a young person. And they raised their hand. This is in the US now, not in Europe, in the US in 2018. And the person thought that the strategy sounded fine, but it did not include enough about what we were going to do in the world around sustainability. And what he said was, you can't build a better working world unless you're focused a lot more on sustainability. Now, at that time, people in Europe were very much further ahead than people in the US, but this question came in the US. So I actually said, that's an excellent point, and I'm going to go back and really figure out how to really drive sustainability much more into our strategy. So it was at that moment that we kind of rethought what we were doing, and we started really thinking seriously around sustainability. And then obviously it's become incredibly important now in everything we do.
No, as you know, I was quite surprised when you didn't change building a better working world when you took over, and because I'm used to the situation usually when a new chief executive comes in, the first thing they do is potentially throw out things of great value, and it was a joy to actually sort of see you deepen it and build it into the heart of Next Wave. I'd love to know sort of a bit more about the thought processes. Were you tempted to change it and just put your own thumbprint on the organization?
Yeah, we did talk about changing it but for a very short amount of time. I think most of our partners, and at the time when we were creating the new strategy, we had a strategy leadership group that was outside of our leaders. So it was 50 partners from around the world. We brought them together to help develop the strategy. And we talked about, building a better working world and our purpose and whether we should change it. And it actually, the conversation was not very long, Dave. It was pretty short, actually, where a few people just said, why would we change it? It's working, and it's taking us a long time to make sure that all our people understand it, and it fits for everything we do, and it fits our strategy going forward. And so what we did say is, when we were done developing Next Wave, we'd look at it again to make sure that it fit, which we did, and decided not to change it. And so I'm not someone who has to change things just for the sake of changing, just because I came into a new role. Now, in fairness, I was involved with developing the purpose from the beginning back in 2012. But if something's working, no reason to fix it, is a little bit of the short answer.
Yeah. We need an advertising campaign to explain that to a few other CEOs, I think.
Yeah, I can understand.
I'm going to switch to a deeply serious topic, and we're all acutely aware of the horrors that are taking place in Ukraine and Russia, and it took only a few days for almost the corporate sector to be weaponized and to be used as quite a strong instrument to rightly sort of address what Russia was doing. How did EY approach that situation, and what have you done?
Yeah, so this has been a very difficult situation for EY, because obviously we're a global organization and we have partners all around the world, and we have a real sense of family. When you join EY, you join the EY family, and that's our culture. And that's our culture at the partner level, but it's our culture at all levels. So when the situation occurred, and we really wanted to make sure that we were taking care of our people and taking care of our partners in both locations. So in terms of Ukraine, we had 700 people in Ukraine, and we helped the families come out of Ukraine, the ones that wanted to. Most of the men stayed back to fight and to help. But we were able to extract about 500 families from Ukraine that were part, EY families. And it was incredible, Dave, the openness that people all over the world had in terms of taking them on, giving them housing and so forth. It was incredible from all over the world, certainly from Poland and Germany and so forth, but even from the US and other places. So that was the Ukraine part. Now the Russian part was much more difficult. So we're the largest firm in Russia. We have 4,700 people there, over 100 partners. And there, we decided pretty early on that we could not be affiliated with Russia anymore. And we had to start a process to disaffiliate ourselves. And we obviously were not doing any work for sanctioned individuals, but we also wanted to just extricate the EY name out of Russia. So we are in the process of doing that now. That's not a simple thing. There's a lot of legalities in terms of how we do that. Obviously, we have contracts with partners from all over the world, some that are still operating in Russia. So we have to figure out how to get out of that. But eventually what we will do, and it's going to be done now in the next few months, we will pull the EY name out of Russia. And out of the partners that are there, some partners will move out of Russia. They're all Russian partners. The expats have already left, but some do not want to be in Russia anymore. So they will move out. And then some will reorganize themselves into a small local firm to do their business in Russia. But of the 4,700 people, that will come way down because obviously there's no business there, even for this local firm. So there might be a couple thousand left, maybe. Every day, that seems like that'll be less and less. We talk about Russia and where we see it going in the future from a business perspective. And right now, to me, it looks more and more like it could become more like North Korea than anything else.
No, I mean, that's fantastic. And I'm sure there's lots of people on the webinar who appreciate the action that you took and are taking. I think everybody would support it. Amazing. Coming back to sort of the bigger world, the whole notion of sort of organizations becoming purpose-driven has sort of broadened the conversation around how you measure and report and create value. And I know that it's something that's sort of close to your heart, and that, the large corporations and how they report value. And I know from my small business that I take great pride in the number of houses I help, the people sort of buy through their success, and the contribution that they make in society, and, the families that they create and build. It's obviously a much bigger topic for sort of the Unilevers and the IBMs of this world as to how they report and talk about creating value. And I know you started the Embankment project some years ago with the Coalition for Inclusive Capitalism. Could you talk about just what your thinking is in terms of how you see organizations maybe reporting in the future, and how regulators are sort of thinking?
Yeah, this is thanks for that question. It's a hot topic. So for those of you who don't know, the Embankment project was something that really got started back in 2013, 14, where really it was a group of corporates that got together with us to really figure out how corporates can really rally together to be focused much more on the long term. And not just to be focused on short-term earnings. And that was the beginning of really, how do we show, and how do corporates show what they're doing for different stakeholders? From that project, then we got involved in a project with the World Economic Forum around really creating metrics for companies to disclose that really cut across all the different areas of ESG. And really show the world everything a company does from a long-term perspective. So we, with our competitors, actually worked with the International Business Council of the World Economic Forum. And we worked, and the chair of that council is Brian Moynihan from Bank of America. And we worked with him to develop these 21 metrics that we actually now have over 150 companies committed to disclosing. And these are all metrics across all the different areas of ESG. With that, we feel that that was the basis then for regulators to really look at those and come up with what they want companies to disclose. And what's happened is the regulators have much more leaned towards the planet piece of that, or quote climate. And so now what you're seeing is you are seeing the regulators in the US, for those of you who aren't familiar, the SEC put out rules around disclosure around climate, a few weeks back, and they put out, rules for comment. They just extended that period a couple of weeks for companies to put their letters in on what they think of the rules. It is, I can go into a lot of detail on the SEC proposal, but at its heart, it is trying to get companies to be much more focused on sustainability. It wants disclosure around what a company's plan is to become net zero, and then also, carbon emissions are a big part of that. But also, they want it to be audited to make sure that companies are doing the right thing. So there's a lot of controversy over that proposal because some companies feel that it's gone overboard. Others feel like it's okay. But also globally, an organization was formed, the ISSB, to come up with metrics as well. And I know, and the EU, there's a chance the EU will come up with metrics around sustainability as well. Now, I know all the clients on the video are going to say, couldn't you guys come up with one set of standards? And trust me, we've been trying. But every country, every regulator, wants their say. And I will be the first to admit we've been trying, but we're failing. I think we basically have failed. So there will be probably 3 sets of metrics that are out there. But the good part is that the basis for those metrics should be very similar. So a company, once they build their processes and technology, I think they should be able to react to the different standards out there. So that's just on climate. In the metrics we developed with the IBC, we have metrics around society in general, and certainly metrics around human capital and diversity. So that's a bit of a walk through the whole disclosure. Yeah. Dave, sorry to have a long walk, but it is a bit of a long walk.
No, I'm sure people found that fascinating. And I'm going to finish with one last question, and then I'll open it up to anybody who's got a question if you put your hand up. And this is the first time I've done this, so I'm not quite sure where the hands will appear, but I'm sure Nicolina or Tamara will help me out if I struggle. But EY was one of the first companies to truly become purpose-driven. You've been doing this now for over a decade. A lot of the CEOs I sort of meet, they've heard about Larry Fink talking about it in his letter, and they think they've got to create one. And, the American Business Roundtable have changed their charter. And so there's a lot of noise about it. And, some people are rightly very cynical as to whether it's a good idea, and they're suspicious. But what sort of advice would you give to any chief executive who might be going down this path? And what are your learnings from the last decade?
Yeah, so one, all advice I would give, and I do give to CEOs, is in developing a new strategy, you have to have a long-term value strategy, and it has to include all your different stakeholders. I think today that's a must. If you don't have that, you're I don't think you're going to succeed, and B, I don't think anyone's going to want to work for you and or be acquired by you or any of that. So I think you have to start with really a long-term strategy around your different stakeholders, and that includes your clients, that includes your people, and that includes society overall. And I think everything we talk about really fits into that. And Dave, I'll have to give a little commercial. I was contacted by Ron J. Galata. He's a professor at Harvard, and he wrote this book, Deep Purpose. And he has a lot of different examples of companies in it, and he has Larry Fink highlighted in it. We're highlighted in it as well. But he did a lot of work around the performance of companies with a purpose, and the difference with companies that don't really have a purpose, and the numbers and the long-term value of these companies, the market value of these companies are all very different. And so there's a big proof point in all the work that he's done in terms of the importance of having a purpose.
Okay, fantastic. And we've had a question in from Peter Tucker in the chat, so I'm going to ask you that one, and it's a good pointed question. So brace yourself. But given the terrific culture of purpose and the family at EY, why do you think employee turnover is what it is today?
That's an excellent question. And so, we've been experiencing more than the usual turnover. You have to first understand our business model. At some level, we need turnover because we have an up and out business model. So we're not a typical corporate whose turnover is, I don't know, 5 to 10%. We need turnover. That for us, good turnover is around 15 to 20%. Anywhere in there works. As you know, we're an up and out business, so people get promoted every year to the next level, and obviously the next level gets smaller and smaller. And so it's naturally built to have some turnover. But post-COVID, and during COVID, we had very low turnover. But then post-COVID, our turnover spiked up. And it spiked up no different than many of your companies out there today, for a lot of different reasons. One, it was people just reevaluating their life, reevaluating what's important post-COVID and what's not. And for us, that cuts both ways. There were some people who felt like they worked too hard and didn't want to do that. But then there's also other people elsewhere that would love to join an EY because they feel like it's a great way to build a career. So it's something that we certainly would like for it to come down. And in the last few months, it's been much more stabilized. But I think we really have just been caught up in what's happening in the world in general, and not so much an EY specific matter. We do a lot of surveys, exit surveys, and so forth.
Yeah.
There's always some people who are unhappy because their raise isn't big enough, or they didn't get this bonus, or they didn't get this role. But for the most part, this has been an experience that all our clients are experiencing as well.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. We've got the first person starting a movement with the hand up. Alison, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you very much for that. It's very, very interesting, and I think EY is well known for having a very compelling purpose. I'm from the Storytellers, and we work with a lot of businesses that do have a very compelling purpose. My question is, it's great to have a compelling purpose on a corporate level for lots and lots of different reasons. But how do you make sure that your people within EY live the purpose and understand what it means from a day-to-day, in their day-to-day roles? Do you have some kind of mechanism, or are they measured on it, or how do you make sure it really lives authentically from individuals rather than just having a corporate purpose, if you know what I mean?
So first of all, we measure our leaders off 10 metrics, which include purpose as part of that. It includes things like sustainability, includes diversity, inclusiveness, and equity. And so we have a scorecard that really measures our leaders on 10 very different metrics. So that's more at the leadership level. But at the individual level, we also, we want to make sure that our people live our values, and we make sure they sign up to our values every year. We have a code of conduct, and we have our values. Our values are people who demonstrate integrity, respect, and teaming. And teaming is critical there. That's part of our culture. people with the energy, enthusiasm, and courage to lead, and people who build a relationship by doing the right thing. Those are our values that we really broadcast around the firm, and we make our people sign up to them once a year in our code of conduct. And so that's the more corporate, let's call it, kind of compliance part of it, but they believe it. The second part really is around people living our values, is around them doing good outside of the corporate world. And we do have a lot of programs. We have an overall overarching program called Ripples. And this is really encouraging our people to touch the lives of people that maybe aren't as fortunate as they are. And so we are touching the lives of millions of people around the world with all the work that our people do, whether that's in charitable organizations or helping others in different situations. We actually, our long-term goal for that is to touch 1 billion people around the world.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm going to go to Joanna and then I'll come to you, George. Joanna, do you want to just ask your question? You're still on mute, Joanna. If you just take it off mute, you should be.
Joanna Seddon from Prescient. Hi, Dave. We've shared common pasts in various.
We certainly have.
Yep. And also various members of your team, in fact. I have. It's two questions, except it's really one question because they're connected. I have to congratulate you, first of all, on not changing your purpose, because, a purpose is why a company exists. So if it was right in the first place, it shouldn't change. If you look at J&J, the Credo, if you look at Procter & Gamble, touching lives, improving life, that's not going to change. But how it manifests itself and what it means in the terms of the concrete actions the company does, I would suggest, probably should, and probably in your case, have changed and evolved. And one of the things that you made reference to, which is, I think, a difficult thing to deal with in evolving purpose, is that, or involving what purpose means, is how do you differentiate between purpose and doing good in the sense of ESG and being a good corporate citizen? Because they're not the same thing, but you kind of veered into, well, today it's about diversity, inclusion, sustainability, right? Which everybody is saying. So can you talk a bit about how it's changed and how you deal with that sort of crossing over?
Well, Joanna, I think I understand your question. First of all, I agree with you. The purpose has to be why you exist, and changing it, I don't think is helpful. But then I do think that, today, things like sustainability, is part of the business world. And so if your purpose doesn't incorporate that, then I do think we would have changed our purpose, because that's what's driving business today. So, but our purpose, building a better working world, incorporates that. And so I don't feel like it needed to be changed, because I think today, building a better working world, you have to build it in a sustainable way. Now, this is an interesting question. More recently, someone said we should change our purpose to building a better sustainable world. And so and I said, you know what? I think that's already included. That's already included, because the world today has to be sustainable. And so we don't necessarily need to put the word in. And so there is a crossover as things change. But as things change, if you feel or you find that it doesn't fit your purpose, then I would change it.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much. George, I'm going to go to you.
See if I can turn off my mute there. Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're there.
Hi, so nice to see you. And thank you for inviting me to this session. And thank you, Carmine, for a very interesting presentation. I'm curious as to what extent EY's behavior is changing or evolving, given your purpose, around proactively designing what the better working world looks like. I mean, are you the proud recipients of briefs from your fabulous clients who kind of tell you what they're trying to do and you just get on and make it happen? So build a better working world like that? Or to what extent are you really investing more and differently in taking the game to the customer?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. No, we are, well, as Dave mentioned, we acquired a firm called Parthenon now about 6-7 years ago, and that was the beginning of our real strategy practice. And so we've taken that acquisition and built around the world, built a platform around helping companies with their strategy and where they need to be. And so we're not just taking briefs from clients, we're actually helping them and driving them to new strategies and new ways of looking at things. So one example there is the metaverse. So I was joking around with it before we came on camera with Dave. We are doing a lot of work right now helping companies figure out what's their role going to be in the metaverse. And it's a topic that's top of mind. It's a topic that when you talk about strategies right now, every sector has to be thinking of this. Now, some sectors are ahead because of, logically what it means, while others are behind. But right now, for example, we are doing a lot of work around the metaverse with consumer products companies and helping them figure out, how are they going to use the metaverse going forward. And, there's obvious uses around their products and showing their products, and that kind of thing. But then there's also uses that I was able to get a demonstration of some of the things that we built, where you could actually use the metaverse today in the design of a factory as part of your supply chain. And you could actually move things in the metaverse in, let's say, a robot in that factory that will actually move the robot physically wherever that factory is. Now, you have to have a digitized supply chain, a digitized factory and all that, but it just shows you the potential of where things can go. These are all things we're developing, and we're helping our clients get there, to your question before. So thanks for that. We are being more and more proactive, much more front-end strategy driven.
Very interesting. Thank you for giving that example. I thought that was terrific.
Thanks, George. And I'm going to go to Duncan next. If you take yourself off mute, Duncan, and then you should have the opportunity to ask your question.
Thank you, Dave, and hopefully you can hear me. Hello, Carmine. I'm Duncan Chater from Bloomberg. Question for you, actually, obviously not only in terms of your own purpose, I guess you get great visibility into lots of different companies. I'm quite interested just what you've seen in terms of where some of the biggest failures are around purpose. Things like authenticity and consistency probably spring to my mind. But are there any other areas, are there any common themes where businesses really struggle to either come under pressure to change direction or fail completely?
Yeah, I think, Duncan, first of all, it's good to see you. So I think the biggest failure is really driving a purpose into an organization where the organization really believes it versus it just be a tagline. I think that's certainly what I see is in terms of a lot of failures. The other thing that's happening out there now, as a lot of you know, there's a lot of corporate splits. There's a lot of divestitures. Dave, you mentioned the credo at Johnson & Johnson. Well, Johnson & Johnson's going through a split. So there are a lot of questions around, what are the new company's purpose? Who keeps the purpose? Does it fit the existing company if 2/3 of the company is different? And so I am seeing a lot of conversation around that and what makes sense and doesn't make sense, because the company could be very different depending on how these companies split up. And I do think in that situation, you could fail if you make some wrong decisions around your purpose.
And I would add to that as well, Carmine. One of the things I often see, and I'm sure this will resonate, is that the board of directors think the task is to create the purpose statement. And, you see lots of plaudits and slapping on back when they get to the point where they've got it, and then they don't actually understand it's 10 years of hard effort to activate it, to live it, to believe it, to make it work. And, I don't know whether that sort of resonates with you, but, what I've watched with EY is you've done the heavy lifting.
Yeah, no, it totally resonates, Dave, and thank you for bringing that up. A lot of a good purpose has to be bottoms up. not just top down. And so people have to believe it. And I would say if you're developing a purpose, I think you need to use your employees and what they think the purpose of the organization is right up front. And that's what we try to do in terms of building a better working world back, 10 years ago. I think that's important going forward.
Brilliant. I'm going to flip to Marjan now, who's got a question. If you come through, Marjan, we should hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, Dave. My name is Marjan van der Weijden. I head the Global Financial Institutions Group for Fitch Ratings. I'm also the chair for the Fitch Group DEI Council. And I have a question in relation to that. So when you talk about purpose and strategy, I guess that's mostly sort of set globally. But what have you done at EY to make sure that translates locally? Because you're a global company as well, same for us. So I'm trying to work out that dynamic and would be interested to hear what you specifically done at EY to make it feel and live locally as well.
And Marja, in terms of diversity, was that your specific question?
Well, yeah, my interest is on the diversity side, but I think it's no different for anything like strategy, and I guess particularly with purpose as well. I can imagine there's an element, you set it globally, but purpose might be lived differently locally.
Yeah. So I think on purpose, it's actually more consistent than you think. Some things might have a different feeling locally, but the actual purpose is pretty consistent. On diversity and inclusiveness and equity, this is something we're very focused on. We measure our local leaders around this as well. And we do have a bit of a top-down view here on where things have to move to. So the example I would give you is around our partner promotions. So our partner promotions the last few years, from a gender perspective, have been around 33-34% women, which that's a big improvement versus 5-10 years ago, which was maybe in the low 20s or mid 20s. So we actually expect our areas and our regions and so forth to stay with those kinds of metrics. Now, it doesn't mean, that some region is going to have fewer women, but then when it rolls up, we expect the numbers to be pretty close to that. So that's we do operate some of that top down. And then we're very big just on educating people across the world around cultural differences, around making sure that they treat their fellow EYers with respect. We do a lot of education of our people across the world around that. Now, we're always going to have pockets of teams that might have a bit of a different view, and you're going to always have the partner in XYZ country who's considered someone who's very difficult to work with and is working their people night and day and that kind of problem. But we really discourage that, and eventually those things come out in terms of the evaluations and everything else.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
And I think we've got time for one more question. So Martin, I know you've had your hand up, patiently waiting, so I'll let you fire away.
I'll lower it as well eventually. So Carmine, great to see you.
Are we allowing Martin to ask a question?
Full disclosure, we've played paddle tennis together and all kinds of competitive activities. This is going
to be a good one then.
Oh no,
nice friendly one, Carmine. No, I mean, when you talk about the dimensions of the organization, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands and the millions of applicants and what have you. The whole notion of building a better world is such a broad purpose, and then when you talk about the metaverse and all those kinds of things, I'm just really curious about how you manage the strategic process of the firm, because the potential for scope creep is enormous when you've got a broad purpose and you've got all these people doing all these things. How on earth do you kind of keep the overall boundaries of the organization manageable?
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. It actually, it's when you're in the organization, you realize it right away. I mean, it really boils down to people, clients, and the social aspects of the world. And I come back to, at the end of the day, we're a client-serving organization, and our people work in teams serving clients. And that's whether they're an audit team, a tax team, a consulting team. That's kind of how we work. And so, that gives us a lot of outside in information, which is important in terms of everything we do. Second, we're a people organization. So we talk a lot about all the investments we're making in technology, and Martin, you know this as well, and we're making billions of dollars in investment in technology. But at the end of the day, you all aren't hiring just technology. You're hiring people with technology. And so we need good people, and we need to make sure that people want to work at EY, make sure that our culture is right, and make sure that people are trained. I haven't talked much about that, but we train our people. We're the training ground for so many finance organizations around the world, and we spend a lot of money training our people. And so it really boils down, and then of course there's all the societal work that we do, and the culture, and so forth. That's what makes up EY. And that's, I distill everything down to those three areas. And so everything we do on the revenue side, on driving the business, relates to clients. So, everyone's assigned to a client, including myself. I have a lot of client relationships that I deal with every day. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good. But that's how we work. And that's kind of how we distill it.
Thanks. And I guess just one last question, and then we'll wrap, Carmine. Over the last 10 years, you guys have done tons of things. Is the one thing that sort of sticks out that you're really proud of? It can be a little thing, it can be a big thing that, you really go, that this brought the purpose to life. And, I know you're a great storyteller, but yeah, is there anything that sticks out in your mind?
I think over the last few years, Dave, probably the best thing is really just taking care of our people. And I'll give you some example. As you know, I'm a very people-oriented person, and we mentioned about Ukraine and Russia, but then also just taking care of our people during the pandemic. So we went into the lockdown in March, whatever it was, 10th of 2020, not knowing really how we were going to operate our business going forward. And fortunately, we're a Teams Microsoft shop, but we also use Zoom in case Eric's on Zoom call. But no, we also use Zoom. But we basically, I was fortunate enough to go to a conference at Microsoft's headquarters, and that's when we first learned about Teams, the technology. And while we're a Microsoft shop, we didn't have Teams. So we came out of that meeting, and I said, well, we have to at least try it. So we had our global board on Teams, and then we had our top 100 leaders in the firm on Teams, and we couldn't figure out why we would need it. We couldn't figure out. We're like, well, why do we need that? We have email, we have text, WhatsApp, it's just another thing. And so we kind of just sat there with a couple hundred people on Teams. When the lockdown happened, all of a sudden, in a matter of weeks, we had 300,000 people on Teams. And we were able to operate our business as if pretty much nothing changed. Everything became virtual, but we were able to drive we were more client-centric during that time than we've ever been. And so to me, that's another area that I think we did really well in terms of driving our business. And we helped people all along the way. We helped people get through the pandemic. We helped banks, cut checks to people. We did a lot of helping. We did a lot of pro bono work during the pandemic, and I feel really good about that. But the simple answer is just really taking care of our people around the world.
That's fantastic. I'm really sad we've run out of time. I've never known an hour go so quick, but just like a massive, massive thank you. There's some lovely comments coming into the chat about how much people have sort of loved the session, but that was just fantastic. And I could chat to you all evening, but I know you have a low boredom threshold, so we'll stop now. So I'm going to pass back to Tamara, but huge thank you, Carmine. That was just an absolute pleasure.
Dave, thank you, and Tamara, thank you, and the British American Business Council. It's great to be here. I see a few pictures of friends on the screen, so I want to say hello to everyone as well. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and just thank you on behalf of British American Business. Carmine, it's no wonder that over 3 million people apply to work with you each year. So that was fantastic. Thanks everyone for attending. This is just another iteration, as I said, in our Power of Purpose series. Join us again in the fall for the next one. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.